Hello, in this video I'm going to give you the best settings to shoot movies with the Canon 1300D or Rebel T6. The Canon 1300D or Rebel T6 is an excellent camera for shooting both stills and movies, and in this video I'm going to give you the best settings to shoot movies. So in order to make any changes in the 1300D for video, you need to be in the video mode. And in order to do that, you turn the dial mode on the top right round to the very bottom option, which shows a video camera. And when I do that, you may hear that the mirror inside the camera pops up, like that. And that enables you to see through the viewing screen at the back. And this really is the only way you can shoot video. You can't look through the viewfinder and shoot video. You have to shoot it through the back screen here. It also gives you access to the menu tabs which are dedicated to video. And the first thing that you really need to do here is choose your video system. Now this is quite important in some ways, and in other ways it's not important at all. It was developed when TV systems were very different. And if you wanted to show your videos on a TV screen, you had to align what was shot on the camera to the TVs that you were going to be showing the video on. There are two systems. One is PAL, P-A-L, and the other is NTSC. Now, NTSC tends to be the system which is operated in the United States, and PAL tends to be the system which is operated in Europe and other parts of the world. In all honesty, there's not an enormous amount of difference. However, it does change the way that the camera operates very slightly. So when you start to look at the frame rates, which we'll do later on, you will see that under NTSC you get a frame rate option of 60 frames per second or 30 frames per second, and we'll go into that later. And when you're in PAL, you get the option of 50 frames a second and 25 frames per second. They're the real differences that you will notice. Most people these days don't shoot on DSLRs in order to show their videos on televisions. They tend to use it for social media or for showing on a laptop, in which case it doesn't make really any difference. But in order to change that, you need to go into the menus and you go to tab 2, and down at the bottom you have the option to change video system. And it's a very binary option. You either have NTSC or you have PAL. You don't have any other choices. The second thing you need to think about is file size and frame rate. And these things are quite important because they will decide the quality of the videos that you shoot. Now, this camera is pretty good. It'll shoot 1080, which is full HD, and it will also shoot 720, which is standard HD, both of which are perfectly acceptable for social media platforms. In order to make those changes, we go again into Video tab 2, and right at the very top there is Movie Recording Size. And if we press on that option, then we get 4 options. Now this, as I say, depends on whether you've chosen NTSC or PAL. In this instance, I'm on PAL, so I get 1920 times 1080, 25 frames per second. 1920 by 1080, 24 frames per second, which is tries to give a sort of movie impression, and 1280 by 720, which will give me 50 frames per second. Now that can be quite useful if I want to shoot slow motion action, because I can shoot things at 50 frames per second and then slow it right down so it goes down to half speed or quarter speed, and it still looks quite effective. The very bottom one is 640 times 480, and frankly I wouldn't bother with that at all because the quality of it simply isn't good enough. So I would choose primarily, in most cases, 1920 by 1080 25, or if I was in NTSC at 30, and then if I didn't choose that, I would choose the 1280 by 720 at 50, or again if I was in NTSC at 60 frames per second. So that's the second choice you need to make to decide how you're going to shoot your movies with the 1300D. The third thing you need to think about when shooting movies with this camera is exposure. Now, when you're shooting stills with the Canon 1300D, you have lots of choices. They're all here on the mode dial, and they go from entirely manual to semi-automatic and then to entirely automatic options. And in most of these cases, the camera is trying to get the best exposure for the stills that you're shooting within the given parameters that you have presented to it. With movies, it's different. You have two options. You can either shoot automatic or you can shoot manual. Now again, with automatic, in movies, the camera will try to get the best possible exposure for you, and in many cases it works very well. So I would suggest that, initially at least, you shoot in auto, just to get a feel for how the camera works, and you don't have to worry then about the exposure because the camera will do the best it can for you. However, if you want to go into manual, there are different ways of changing the various parameters for manual that are different to the way that you would do that for stills. So if we go into menu, movie exposure is in video tab 1 right at the top, and if you click on that, then you get the two options, auto or manual. Now obviously auto is auto and you do essentially point and shoot, but if you choose to go into manual, then you have much more control over the settings that you can have. You will see that you have options for setting the shutter speed, for setting the aperture, and for setting the ISO. So for the shutter speed, you use this dial here, and by moving it up and down, the shutter speed moves up and down. By just pressing the AV button here and rotating that dial, you can change the aperture. And so that goes up or down by pressing those two buttons, or pressing the AV button and rotating the dial. But trying to change the ISO by just pressing the ISO button on the back won't work. The ISO is changed by using the flash button at the top. And again, by pressing that and rotating the dial, you can move the ISO up and down and change the parameters for your video in manual setting. The fourth thing you need to think about is sound. Now, the Canon 1300D does not have an external microphone socket, it just has an internal microphone. So sound can be a bit limited with this camera. But if you go into menus and on shooting tab 2, the second one down is sound recording, and you can set that to one of three options. You can have either auto, manual or disable. I would argue against disabling it entirely because sometimes it's useful to have sound even if you don't intend to use it in the final cut. And then if you choose that, you have either auto or manual. Auto is not bad, but it will try to pick up as much sound as possible, and you may not want that. You may not want the ambient sound. Manual is not too bad, provided you're reasonably close to the source of sound. It has the decibel bar going across the bottom, and as with most cameras, the objective is to try and peak on about 12. In terms of its recording in itself, it's actually pretty good. So I wouldn't be adverse to using the internal microphone, but you have to be a little bit careful. But those are the options for sound. Okay, so when you're shooting videos, you're actually, as I said earlier, recording and shooting through the back screen. That means that the autofocus system is a bit slower than when you're shooting normally for stills through the viewfinder. That's because it's a different system entirely. Now, you have a couple of half-decent options for autofocus when you're shooting video, and the way to see those is to go into Video tab 1 and down to AF method, and then you will see that you have Flexi Zone, which is the single focus shot. In other words, you press the button here as you would for stills, and the camera focuses. It doesn't change focus until you press here again. The advantage of that is that you can actually press the focus button and still record at the same time, which is very useful. The second option is called Live Mode, and that's quite useful because it incorporates a facial recognition mode, and it will try to move in and out as people or the subjects move when you're shooting the movie. The third option is called Quick Mode, and that really refers to the idea that shooting through the live view screen at the back is slower than shooting through the viewfinder. And so what that does is it literally bounces back into the viewfinder mode. So if you press this, the camera mirror will come down, the viewfinder will operate the autofocus to get the focus properly, and then it will bounce back up again. Obviously, that cannot be done whilst you are videoing. So it's something that you would need to do initially and then press record on video. The other two systems do operate whilst you're videoing, and I would prefer to use those nearly every time. So the system I prefer is FlexiZone. It means that I have better control over focus, and I tend to use that. Obviously, if we're in a situation like this, where the camera is on a tripod and the subject doesn't move much, I would use FlexiZone to sharpen and get the focus right, and then I would switch autofocus off on the lens so that the lens is not constantly going in and out as I move slightly forwards and back, because I am, generally speaking, sharp in this frame. The next couple of options that we're going to look at are in Video tab 3, and it may seem that they're less important than the other options that we've looked at so far, but they do quite clearly affect the way that your video looks, and so they are worth checking out. So if we go to Video tab 3, then at the bottom is the picture style option. Now, these are the same options that you get with stills, and with stills you can choose to have vivid or sepia or many other options, and some of them are set so that they bring out the best qualities for portrait and landscape. With video, it tends to be better to try and shoot video as flat as possible, and so the best option to start with, at least, is neutral. And so you should always set that really to neutral for video until you make the decision that you want to change the picture style and shoot something differently. The one just above that in Video tab 3 is custom white balance. Now, if you go and buy the manual for this camera that we've done, you will see that there's an entire video on custom white balance, and there's some very good reasons why you should always take care to either set the custom white balance or check that it's okay. It's very important for shooting videos, because if you start moving around and shooting things in different light, then the one stable element, the one constant, will be the white balance. Okay, so those are the basic settings for shooting video with the 1300D or Rebel T6. If you want to know more, then why not take a look at our manual, which was specially written for this camera. In fact, we're giving away a sample of the manual absolutely free. It contains 2 training videos, including the full training video for shooting movies with the 1300D or Rebel T6. All you have to do is click on the link here or in the description below, and you can download it absolutely free and straight away.